And cockroaches lived in a perfect place, a cockroach perfect place. At the end of 7 months, there would be 164 billion of them. Well, there's not 164 billion of them because there's no perfect place for them. Instead, they're in competition with each other. They're in competition for food, they're in competition for space, and they're in competition for mating. So what happens is that there has to be a survival. Well, who survives? Some people say the survival of the fittest. Well, that means you don't understand evolution. It's not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the one that can live long enough to find a mate and reproduce. Ants work together. Only one of them is going to reproduce. The rest of them are going to try to help somebody reproduce. So it's survival of the fit, not survival of the fittest. And then, of course, what happens is those individuals get to reproduce, and that species survives. But look, we talked about billions and billions of cockroaches not surviving. Why is that? And the answer is they had some genetic changes that weren't good. The idea is to have some tiny little changes in your DNA. Maybe it takes 5 or 6, 7, 20 generations for it to show up even. But when it does show up, it's good. Evolution is extremely inefficient. So is photosynthesis inefficient. Biological processes are inefficient. It's just a bad design. But what happens is some of them make it, and some of them don't. So when I'm doing this, I have to use some kind of a science. So if you look at the black sheet down here with the blue markings around it, I talk about fossils, and I talk about genetics, and I talk about homology, or the structures of plants and animals, and I talk about distribution in the planet, and I talk about embryology. But what's interesting about these things is they all agree. They all approach evolution from a different point of view, and yet they agree. If we didn't have any fossils at all, none, it wouldn't matter. We still have enough information to prove that evolution took place. If we didn't have any homologic structures to look at, it doesn't matter. We still have enough evolution facts to show that it took place. Now, I had a problem solved for me by the Supreme Court. It happens that there have been 9 cases brought by creationists to the federal courts against evolution. They were competing against each other in the Supreme Court. The first one of those cases that really was important took place in 1968. But in 1982, the Supreme Court case of McClellan versus the Kansas Board of Education ruled in a decision that gave a detailed definition of the term science. The court declared that creation science is not, in fact, a science. What that meant is that people were teaching high school, like me at that time. That meant I couldn't teach creation. It was a religion. I could teach evolution because it fit the definition of science. Now, that court case was challenged by 2 teachers. One of them challenged it on the basis that he had the right to teach because of freedom of speech, that he could do what he wanted to in his class. Well, he lost that case, and he lost it very simply because he was trying to teach creation in a public school that doesn't allow religion to be taught in a public school. He lost. He should have known better to bring the case. And then another guy challenged it. He challenged it on the idea that, well, I'll make my own curriculum. I'll show those guys. Well, of course, what happened is the school board said, hey, fella, you don't make the curriculum in this place, we make it. And he lost the case, too. Now, I hope that makes you understand why the creationists want to get to the 7th grade. They want to get to the 7th grade because that's the only place you can talk to school boards who don't know anything about evolution. Let me explain this to you. When I'm going to use a textbook, what do I use? I use one like this one. Now, this textbook is a pretty basic text. It could be used in the University of Florida, University of Michigan, any large school in the United States. It's small schools. As a matter of fact, I looked at the textbooks that are used here at Embry-Riddle University. They're great. One of the ecology books here has one of the best chapters on evolution I've ever seen. It's a great book. Anyway, This is what I had to use. And if you think about it a second, all the facts in here have to be able to stand scientific scrutiny. Somebody is looking at these babies, you know? Well, here's what you find out. There is not a school in the United States that does scientific research that accepts creationism. Not one major college or university in the United States accepts creationism or intelligent design. Matter of fact, let me say it a different way. I really checked, I really looked, and I couldn't find a major college or university in the world that accepted creation or intelligent design. Now, I thought, the teacher, I got to find out about this stuff. So where do these guys get their ideas? So I ordered some Bob Jones textbooks. This is a Bob Jones life science book. They use it in the 8th grade. It has 500 pages in it. It has 250 references to biblical verses to explain science. It has not one reference to a scientific journal or book. It uses the term God 380 times, Satan 3 times, and hell twice. Here's the biology book that Bob Jones puts out for high school students. It has 692 pages, 350 references to biblical verses to prove science. Not one reference to any scientific journal or scientific book. It mentions God 600 times and Satan 40 times. This book is put right here in Florida. You know it's a creation book because it says so. Biology, God's living creation. It's a creation book. This company claims that they are the largest textbook publishers for creationist schools in the United States. Now remember, we're talking creationist schools. These things would never be allowed in a public school because they're religious. This book has 650 pages in it, 150 references to the Bible. No science references at all to any book, any article, anything. It mentions God 425 times. Well, I'd like to ask a question. You know, when I come before a group like this, and I want to show you that I've tried to keep up with things, I mean, I read the Scientific American, and I trust the Scientific American. I get a book that's specially put out for teachers called the National Center for Science Education. You know, it has a lot in it about evolution and creation. I trust that book. I go to the bookstore and get Discovery. I trust that too. And I trust the National Geographic. They've been at it 100 years. They know how old the Earth is. So I'm looking out at this audience. You look like a really great group. Lots of college students and lots of creationists in here. I'd like to know where I stand before I go any further. How many of you folks would like to see Embry-Riddle University be the first university in the world to accept creation and intelligent design in their science department? Can I show hands? Thank you very much. That's exactly what I expected. You know. Okay. Now, I'm often asked, well, how do you handle the stuff with the students as far as the evidence that's collected? Well, let me just give you a list of things here that are the pieces of